أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Allah said about His ability to return us back to life perfectly on the day of resurrection, yes, we are able to fashion in perfect order the very tips of His fingers. 1400 years ago, some people wondered why God chose to mention the fingertips instead of mentioning something more complicated like the kidney or the eye. Today, science proved that this part of the body is one of the most complicated parts because it is carrying a unique fingerprint.
Go back 1400 years ago and ask anyone, how could you distinguish between one person and the other? To point out to the individuality of each person in the day of judgment. It is logical to speak about the features, the face, like I used to say, a birthmark like Gorbachev's, something that make the individual unique and distinct from others. Why is it that out of all the apparent features of the human being, the Quran chose, in the context of specifying the individuality of each person in the day of judgment, the fingertip? It's common knowledge. No two fingerprints are identical, even in identical twins. And for those who might say, how a DNA? I say, all right, if you have watched OJ trial, you know that sophisticated as it may be, it is not as definitive as still the simple fingerprint.
Almighty Allah said 1400 years ago about mountains, "Have we not made the earth as a wide expanse and the mountains as stakes?" The famous geologist Sir George Airy discovered that what we see on top of the earth, perceiving them as mountains, are just the tops of the mountains, while most of their masses are embedded underground, exactly like a stake that is used to anchor a tent in the ground.
Surah 79, Ayah 32 states, also in the context of creation, "And the mountains hath he firmly fixed." Similar mention of mountains is found in several other surahs. It is permissible to interpret this to imply that mountains are rooted and that modern geophysics has established deep crustal roots for the axial parts of mountain systems at converging plate boundaries. We need research into the history of early Middle Eastern oral traditions to know whether, in fact, such historical events have been reported. If there is no such record, it strengthens the belief that God transmitted through Mohamed bits of his knowledge that we have only discovered for ourselves in recent time.
Allah God Almighty said in the Quran, "It is He who created the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. They swim along, each in an orbit." The orbital movement of the two celestial bodies is confirmed by the data of modern science, and it is inconceivable that a man living in the 7th century AD, however knowledgeable he might have been in his day, could have imagined them.
These facts communicated in the Quran have been discovered by astronomical observations in our age. According to the calculations of experts on astronomy, the Sun is travelling at the enormous speed of 720,000 kilometers an hour in the direction of the star Vega in a particular orbit called the solar apex. This means that the Sun travels roughly 17,280,000 kilometers a day.
Actually, I'm very much impressed by finding true astronomical facts in Quran.
Allah said in the Quran, "Whoever Allah guides, He opens his heart for Islam, and whoever He lets go astray, He makes his chest constrain as if he is ascending gradually in the sky." 14 centuries ago, who could have known that as a man ascends gradually in the sky, oxygen decreases, leading to the feeling of chest tightness. These must be the words of the Creator, Allah.
وَإِن كُنتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَى عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ.
So many have tried. All of them have failed. And many of them ended up becoming Muslims. Amazing.
After examining the Holy Scriptures in the light of modern science, Dr. Maurice Bucaille, a famous French scientist, mentioned the following statement in his book, The Bible, the Quran, and Science.
I could not find a single error in the Quran. I had to stop and ask myself, if a man was the author of the Quran, how could he have written facts in the 7th century that today are shown to be in keeping with modern scientific knowledge?
إن الذين كفروا بالذكر لما جاءهم وإنه لكتاب عزيز لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه تنزيل من حكيم حميد أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
As far as it is known from the history of embryology, little was known about the staging and classification of human embryos until the 20th century. For this reason, the descriptions of the human embryo in the Quran cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad from God.
Thinking of many of these questions and thinking where Muhammad came from, he was after all a Bedouin. I think it is almost impossible that he could have known about things like the common origin of the universe, because scientists have only found out within the last few years, with very complicated and advanced technological methods, that this is the case. Somebody who did not know something about nuclear physics 1400 years ago could not, I think, be in a position to find out from his own mind, for instance, that the earth and the heavens had the same origin.
Progress in botany at the time of the Prophet was in no country advanced enough for it to be established as a rule that plants have both male and female parts. Nevertheless, we may read the following in the Surah Taha.
والله خلق كل دابة من ماء فمنهم من يمشي على بطنه ومنهم من يمشي على رجلين ومنهم من يمشي على أربع يخلق الله ما يشاء إن الله على كل شيء قدير.
In view of the state of knowledge in Prophet Mohammed's day, it is inconceivable that many of the statements in the Quran which are connected with science could have been the work of a man. It is therefore perfectly legitimate not only to regard the Quran as the expression of a revelation, but also to award it a very special place on account of the guarantee of authenticity it provides and the presence in it of reflections which, when studied today, appear as a challenge to human explanation.